I've always liked the smell of cedar. It's clean. It's honest. You cut into a piece of cedar and it tells you exactly what it is by the scent it gives off. There's no hiding with wood. If there's a knot deep inside, the saw will find it. If there's rot, the chisel will reveal it. I've spent 45 years as a carpenter, and I think I liked it because wood doesn't know how to lie. People, though, we're different. We're experts at it. I'm 71 years old now. My hands, they don't look like mine anymore. They're knotted up like old grapevines, scarred from 1,000 slips of the blade, stained with walnut oil that won't ever wash out. These hands have built cradles, dining tables, and the front doors of half the houses in this county. But for 30 years, these same hands have kept a lock on a small, rusted steel box hidden behind a false panel in my workshop. Every morning, I follow the same routine. I wake up at 5:30. My knees pop like dry kindling when I swing my legs out of bed. I make a pot of black coffee, strong enough to peel paint, and I sit on the back porch and watch the fog roll off the fields. Then I head to the shop. I lose myself in the grain. I lose myself in the work. And for 30 years, I've managed to lose myself in the lie. The lie is a beautiful thing, really. It's smooth. It's polished. I've sanded it down so many times there isn't a single rough edge for anyone to catch their finger on. The lie says that 30 years ago, on a rainy Tuesday in October, my wife Elena lost control of her car on Highway 41. She hydroplaned, hit a stand of pines, and died before the ambulance even cleared the station. That's the story my daughter Maya grew up with. I can still see her at 8 years old, wearing those little pigtails with the yellow ribbons. She was sitting on the floor of our old living room when I knelt down and told her that Mama wasn't coming home. I remember the way her face it didn't even break. It just froze, like she was waiting for me to say just kidding. I remember the weight of her small, shaken body when she finally realized I wasn't. I told myself I was protecting her. That's what a father does, right? You build a wall around the things that can hurt your child. You reinforce the foundation. You make sure the roof doesn't leak. But what do you do when the rot isn't coming from the inside? What do you do when the rot is the very foundation you built the whole house on? Maya is 38 now. She's a lawyer, a good one too, sharp as a fresh-honed plane. She has my hands, the long fingers, but she has her mother's eyes, big, dark, observant eyes that seem to look right through a person. Every time she looks at me, I feel like a piece of cheap plywood trying to pass itself off as solid mahogany. I wonder if she can see the glue holding me together. She came over last Sunday. She brought her son, Marcus. He's 6, full of energy, running around my shop and touching things he shouldn't. "Grandpa, what's in there?" he asked, pointing his sticky finger toward the back wall, toward the false panel. My heart didn't just skip a beat, it felt like it hit a wall. I felt the cold sweat prickle the back of my neck, despite the heat of the afternoon. "Just old tools, Marcus," I said. My voice sounded thin, like paper. "Sharp things, not for little boys." Maya was standing in the doorway, leaning against the frame. She was watching me. Not the way a daughter watches a father, but the way a lawyer watches a witness. "You've been spending a lot of time in here lately, Pop," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "You're 71. You're supposed to be slowing down, not working until your knuckles bleed." "I like the work, Maya," I replied, focusing on the piece of oak on my bench. I didn't want to look her in the eye. "Is it quiet, though?" she asked. She walked over and picked up a photograph I keep on the corner of my bench. It's a picture of Elena. It's the only one I kept. She's laughing, standing in front of a rose bush we planted our first year in the house. She looks so full of life, so innocent. I don't remember her voice anymore, Maya whispered. I try to call it up, but it's like a radio station fading out. All I have is that story about the car accident, Highway 41, and the rain. I felt the lies shifting. It was like a heavy load of timber in the back of a truck when you take a turn too fast. I felt it slide. It was a long time ago, Maya, I said. My hands were shaking. I had to grip the edge of the workbench to keep her from seeing. You went out there last week, Pop. The shop went silent. Even the crickets outside seemed to stop. Out where? I asked, though I already knew.
Highway 41, the spot where you said it happened, the bend by the pines. She paused, and I could hear her breathing. She talked to an old deputy who's been on the force for 40 years. He was working that night. He told me he remembered every fatal accident on that stretch of road since 1985, every single one. She put the photo back down, carefully, precisely. He said there was no accident on Highway 41 that night, no hydroplaning, no car in the trees. He said the only thing that happened that week was a police raid on a house 3 towns over. I couldn't breathe. The air in the shop was thick with sawdust and 30 years of stagnant air. My chest felt tight, like I'd been cinched with a steel band. This is it, I thought. The saw has hit the knot. I looked at her. I saw the mother's eyes demanding the truth. I saw the daughter's heart, terrified of what that truth might be. And then I looked past her, toward that hidden panel. Inside that box isn't a death certificate from a county morgue. It's a state prison file. It's a stack of letters written on yellowed, lined paper, stamped with an inmate ID number. It's the record of a woman who didn't die in a flash of chrome and glass, but who withered away behind concrete walls while I told our daughter she was an angel in the sky. Pop, Maya said, her voice trembling now. Where is my mother? What did you do? I looked at my hands, the walnut stain, the scars, the lies. I realized then that you can't build a life out of wood, but you can't build a life out of secrets, not one that'll stand. I walked over to the back wall. My legs felt like lead. My fingers found the hidden latch, the wood smooth from 30 years of me checking to make sure it was still locked. I felt the click. I didn't do anything to her, Maya, I said, my voice cracking like a dry board. I just did something to you. I stole the truth because I thought the truth would kill you. I pulled the panel back. The rusted steel box sat there, cold and accusing. I took the key from around my neck, the one I've worn every day since I was 41 years old. She's not in the ground, Maya, I whispered. I turned the key. The sound of the lock turning was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. It sounded like a bone breaking. I reached inside and pulled out the thick manila folder. The tab was labeled State Correctional Facility 742-99, inmate Elena Vance. I held it out to her. My heart was thumping against my ribs so hard I thought it might actually give out right there on the sawdust floor. She's been in a cell for 30 years, and today is the day she gets out. Maya's face went white. She didn't reach for the file. She just stared at me, her world collapsing in the space between us.
And as I stood there, holding the weight of 30 years in my trembling hands, I felt a sharp stabbing pain in my left arm, radiating up to my jaw. The room started to tilt. The smell of cedar vanished, replaced by a metallic tang. "Maya!" I gasped, reaching out for the workbench as my knees gave way.
The file hit the floor, the papers spilling out, the mugshots, the court transcripts, the truth I died 1,000 times to hide. And as the world went black, the last thing I saw was my daughter's face, finally realizing that the man she thought was her hero was actually the keeper of her mother's cage. The floor of a woodshop is never truly clean. No matter how much you sweep, there's always a fine layer of dust, oak, pine, walnut, settling into the cracks of the concrete. When I hit the ground, that dust was the first thing I tasted. It was dry, bitter, and smelled like the work I'd used to bury my soul for 30 years. Maya screamed. It sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a deep well. "Pop, Pop, look at me!" I wanted to look at her. I wanted to tell her where the nitroglycerin pills were in the kitchen cabinet, or how to shut off the table saw if I'd left it running. But my lungs felt like they'd been filled with wet cement. Every time I tried to draw a breath, the weight on my chest pressed down harder. It wasn't just pain. It was a physical presence. It was like a massive, invisible hand was squeezing my heart, trying to wring the last bit of life out of it like a wet rag. This is it, I thought. The structural failure. The grain finally snapped. I watched through a blur of gray vision as the manila folder lay just inches from my face. One of the photos had slid out. It was Elena's mugshot, 1996. Her hair was a mess, her eyes were wild and bloodshot, but she was still the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Even then, even when the world was burning down around us. 911, yes, my father, he's not breathing right, please.
Maya's voice was fading. The shop lights began to flicker, though I knew it was just my eyes failing. I felt her hands on my shoulders, shaking me, but I felt miles away. I was sliding back through the decades, back to the night the lie was born. It wasn't a rainy Tuesday on Highway 41. It was a humid, stifling Friday night in a neighborhood the police didn't like to visit unless they had backup. We were young. We were struggling. I was just starting out with my apprenticeship, and the money wasn't coming fast enough to keep the lights on and the milk in the fridge. Elena, she'd always been the fire to my slow-burning wood. She met some people who promised quick returns for simple transport. I didn't know until the blue lights were reflecting off our front window. I didn't know until I heard the front door kick open. I remember the smell of that night. It wasn't cedar, it was burnt copper and cheap floor wax. I remember the way the handcuffs looked on her thin wrists, too heavy, too cold. I remember her looking at me while they pushed her toward the cruiser, her eyes screaming for me to do something. But what could I do? The package was in her car. The scale of what they found, it wasn't just a mistake. It was a mandatory minimum. It was a life sentence in pieces. The next morning, little Maya, only 8 years old, woke up and asked where Mama was. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee, looking at my hands. I thought about the neighborhood. I thought about the way people looked at convicts and their jailbird families. I thought about the schoolyard bullies and the way a shadow like that follows a child, darkening every achievement they ever have. I made a choice. It was a carpenter's choice.
I decided to cut out the rot and replace it with a clean, sturdy piece of fiction. There was an accident, baby, I told her. My voice hadn't even trembled. That was the scariest part. Mama's gone to be with the angels. I'd spent 30 years maintaining that structure. Every year on the anniversary of the crash, we'd go to a cemetery and lay flowers at a headstone I'd paid for, a headstone that sat over an empty plot. I watched my daughter cry over a lie. I held her while she shook, feeling the weight of my own sin pressing into my ribs, and I told myself I was doing it for her. Sir, can you hear me? Stay with us, Silas. The voice was different, sharp, professional. I felt a coldness on my chest, the snap of a shirt being cut open. The air in the shop was replaced by the sterile, biting scent of an ambulance. Thump. My whole body jolted. A bolt of electricity tore through me, white-hot and violent. Thump. I've got a pulse. Let's move. The world became a series of jarring motions, the ceiling of the ambulance, the screech of tires, the rhythmic flash of red and blue against the interior walls. I tried to speak. I tried to tell them to go back. The file, the papers. Maya shouldn't see the transcripts. She shouldn't see the letters Elena wrote from the woman's correctional facility, the ones I never answered, the ones I never let Maya see. Dear Silas, please just let me hear her voice on the phone. I'll tell her I'm away at work. Anything. Just let me know she's okay.
I'd burned dozens of them, but I couldn't burn them all. I'd kept the last 3 years in that box. Why? Why keep the evidence of my own cruelty? Maybe because deep down, a carpenter knows you can't ever truly get rid of the scrap. It just piles up in the corner until it becomes a fire hazard. We're losing them again. Increase the O2. I drifted. I was back in the visitor's room at the prison 20 years ago, the only time I went. Elena sat behind the glass. She looked gray. The light in her was gone. She thinks I'm dead, Elena, I whispered into the phone. She's doing well. She's top of her class. She's happy. If she knows the truth, it'll break her. It'll ruin everything she's built. You're a liar, Silas, she said. Her voice was a ghost of the woman I'd married. You didn't do this for her. You did it because you couldn't bear the shame of being the man whose wife was a felon. You did it for your own pride. I did it to protect her, I barked, hitting the glass. No, she said, leaning in. You buried me alive, and one day that dirt is gonna get in your own lungs. You're gonna choke on it. The hospital was a blur of fluorescent lights and the squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum. Silas Vance, 71, myocardial infarction. We've stabilized him, but he's got significant blockage. I was in a room now, the quiet room. The machines were humming, a steady, rhythmic beep, beep, beep that reminded me of a clock that was running out of time. My eyes fluttered open. The room was dim. The shadows on the wall looked like the bars of a cell. Pop? Maya was sitting in the chair by the bed. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in 3 hours. Her eyes were red, her hair was disheveled, and in her lap was the manila folder. The silence between us was heavier than the lead aprons they put on you for x-rays. I wanted to close my eyes and go back to the darkness. I wasn't ready for this. I had survived the heart attack, but I didn't think I could survive the look in her eyes. The doctor says you're lucky, she said. Her voice was flat, no emotion, just a cold, hard resonance. "He says if I hadn't been there to call the paramedics, you'd be gone." I tried to swallow, but my throat felt like I'd been eating sawdust. "Maya, She interrupted. She held up a piece of paper. It was a letter from 6 months ago. "I read them," she whispered. "I read the letters. I read the trial transcripts. I read the parole board notices." She stood up. She walked over to the bed and leaned over me. The smell of her perfume, the same one she'd worn for years, hit me. It was the smell of my perfect daughter, the one I'd built. "You told me she died in a car accident," she whispered. "You let me cry at a piece of granite for 30 years. I went to law school because I wanted to help people like her, because I thought life was so unfair that it took a good woman away in a rainy ditch, and all this time she was 3 hours away in a cell. I was trying to give you a clean start," I wheezed. "I didn't want you to be a convict's kid. I wanted you to be Maya Vance, the daughter of a respectable man."
A respectable man? She let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded like a sob. "You're a thief, Pop. You didn't protect me. You stole her from me, and you stole me from her." She tossed the folder onto my legs. The weight of it felt like it was crushing my chest all over again. "She's being released today," Maya said, glancing at her watch. "At 6 p.m. The parole board granted it months ago. They've been sending letters to this address, Pop, to your house, letters you never opened, letters she thought I was ignoring." I looked at the clock on the hospital wall. 5:15 p.m. "She has no one," Maya continued, her voice trembling now. "She thinks her daughter hates her so much she wouldn't even reply to a letter for 30 years. She's gonna walk out of those gates with a plastic bag full of clothes and nowhere to go." Maya picked up her purse. She looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time in 71 years, I felt small. I felt like a pile of scrap wood. "I'm gonna get her," Maya said. "Maya, wait!" I reached out, my hand shaking, the IV lines pulling at my skin. "No," she said, backing away towards the door. "You stay here and think about your respectable life, Silas. You stay here with your machines and your secrets. I'm going to find my mother." She turned and walked out. The door swung shut with a soft thud. I lay there in the dark. The heart monitor kept its steady beat. Beep, beep, beep. I looked at the folder on my lap. I thought about Elena walking out into the evening sun, looking for a face that wasn't there. I thought about the 30 years of wood I'd shaped and the one life I completely broke.
The pain in my chest was gone, replaced by a hollow emptiness that was much, much worse. I had survived. My heart was still beating. But as I stared at the ceiling, I realized that the clean start I'd worked so hard to build was nothing but a house of cards, and the wind was finally starting to blow. The hospital released me 3 days later. They gave me a bag of orange pill bottles and a list of things I wasn't allowed to do anymore. Don't lift more than 10 pounds. Don't eat salt. Don't get stressed. It's funny, isn't it? They tell you not to get stressed after you've watched your daughter's heart break into a million jagged pieces right in front of you. I walked back into my house, and for the first time in 30 years, the air felt different. It didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt empty. The silence wasn't the peaceful kind I usually found in my workshop. It was the kind of silence you find in a house after a fire, when the sirens are gone, the water has dried, and all that's left is the smell of things that can never be replaced. I sat at the kitchen table. My hands, those carpenter's hands, felt useless. I looked at the spot on the floor where Maya used to play with her Legos. I looked at the empty chair where Elena should have been sitting for 3 decades. Then the front door opened. It wasn't the kick of a police boot this time. It was soft, hesitant. Maya walked in first. She didn't look at me. She just held the door open, her face a mask of iron and grief. And then she stepped inside.
Elena. She was wearing the coat that didn't fit right. Something Maya must have bought her on the way home. She looked so small. In my head, she had stayed the vibrant, fiery woman of 1996. But the woman standing in my kitchen had hair as white as a fresh-cut pine board. Her skin was lined with the geography of 30 years spent in a place where the sun is a privilege, not a right. We didn't hug. We didn't even speak at first. We just looked at each other across the room I'd built for us. "Silas," she said. Her voice was raspy, like sandpaper on a rough edge. "Elena." That was all. Maya stood between us, a bridge made of glass. "She's staying in the guest room," Maya said. Her voice clipped. "I'm going to help her get her documents in order. I'm going to help her find a life. But you and we're done for a while, Pop. I can't look at you without seeing that fake headstone." They walked past me, the sound of their footsteps on the hardwood, floors I'd installed with my own 2 hands, sounded like a death march. I went out to the shop. I sat on my stool in the dark. I didn't need to turn on the lights. I just needed to know the wood was there. I just sat there and listened to the house. I listened to the sounds of a family trying to figure out how to be strangers. I'm 71 years old. I've lived a good life in the eyes of this town. I've been the reliable carpenter, the widower who raised a daughter on his own, the man who never missed a Sunday service. But sitting in that dark shop, I realized I was the poorest man in the county.
I spent 30 years sanding down the truth, trying to make it smooth enough to swallow. I thought I was a builder, but I was just a hider. Listen to me. If you're holding on to a secret because you think you're protecting someone, you're lying to yourself. You aren't protecting them. You're protecting your own image. You're protecting the way they look at you because you're too much of a coward to let them see the knots in your wood. Secrets are like termites. You don't see 'em. You don't hear 'em. They work in the dark, eating away at the structure of your life, day after day, year after year. From the outside, the house looks fine. It looks strong. But then a storm comes, a heart attack, a question from a daughter, a chance encounter, and the whole thing collapses into a pile of dust. Don't wait for your heart to stop before you start telling the truth. The truth is heavy, yes, it can hurt, it can burn, but it's solid. You can build something on the truth. You can't build anything on a lie except a prison for yourself. I looked at that rusted steel box once last time. It was empty now. The file was gone. The secret was out. I felt lighter, but it was the lightness of a hollow tree. I don't know if Maya will ever forgive me. I don't know if Elena can ever look at me without seeing the man who let her rot in silence. I picked up a piece of cedar. I breathed in the scent. It was honest. I'm 71. I don't have another 30 years to fix what I broke. All I have is today. All I have is the truth, as ugly and jagged as it is. Don't be like me. Don't wait until the grains snap. Tell the truth while you still have the breath to say it.